She opened her purse and found only emptiness. At her side, her two daughters complained of hunger, growing impatient. On the sidewalk in front of the bakery, the scent of fresh bread only deepened her anguish. With no other choice, she went inside and asked for 2 loaves on credit, promising to pay later. The clerk shrugged her off and called the manager, who didn't hesitate to humiliate her. "This isn't a charity. Get out of here." She left without a word, fighting back tears, while the girls, not fully understanding, trailed behind her. The pain of hunger was fierce, but her shame was even greater. What she didn't know was that someone among the bakery's customers had seen everything, and that simple scene would touch that person's heart and change all their lives forever. The sky was still dark when Emily opened her eyes. The midnight silence was broken only by the distant rumble of a train, mingled with the faint whir of a broken fan that barely functioned. Next to her, 6-year-old Laura breathed deeply, curled up against her younger sister Alice, who slept with a worn pacifier dangling from her lips. Emily lay still for a few seconds, staring at the stained ceiling of their wooden house. She knew the day held no good surprises, none left. She rose slowly, careful not to wake her girls. Her knees ached. Her spirit hurt more. She shuffled to the makeshift kitchen, where a shelf held a few cracked dishes and a plastic cup stamped with a faded supermarket logo. She opened the cupboard, clinging to the foolish hope that a miracle had left something behind. Nothing. Not a single packet of pasta. No rice, no sugar. The coffee can, empty for weeks, sat there mockingly. She sighed and began rummaging through drawers, across the floor, even under the mattress. She found 25 cents in loose change, barely enough for a single roll. The girls woke shortly after, rubbing their eyes. Laura was first to ask, "Mom, is there any bread?" Emily forced a smile, the kind only a desperate mother can manage. She bent over and kissed her daughter's forehead. "I'll get some, sweetheart. Just wait a moment, okay?" She pulled on a dingy blouse, twisted her hair into a hurried bun, and grabbed her old bag, just to look like there was something inside. She stepped out into the dew-damp alleys, trying to walk steadily despite the ache in her chest. The corner bakery was modest but clean. The smell of freshly baked bread filled the air, and a bell above the door announced each customer with a soft jingle. The owner, Mr. George, had handed over the reins to his younger son, Rogerio, a man who seemed to have inherited only his father's coldness. Inside, Emily hesitated. Rogerio's eyes fixed on her with thinly veiled suspicion. "Oh, good morning," she whispered. "Yes?" he replied curtly. I was wondering if you could trust me for 2 loaves today. Just today. Tomorrow. I'll pay." Rogerio laughed. Not the kind that shows amusement, but the kind that cuts. "Credit, huh? Now this place is a charity. This is a bakery, ma'am." Emily felt the stares around her. A man reading the paper lowered his glasses. A cleaning lady in uniform stared at her own feet. No one spoke. She steadied her voice to preserve her dignity. "It's just for my daughters. They're hungry. I promise I'll pay you tomorrow." The manager raised his voice so everyone could hear. "Promise? What's a poor woman's promise worth? Look, get out of here. This is a bakery, not a soup kitchen. Go ask at the street corner. Maybe someone there will give you bread." His words hit her like stones. Emily froze. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just lowered her eyes and turned away. Outside, the sun was rising, casting a golden glow over the dirt and mud of the neighborhood streets. Across the road, on a bench in the square, a man watched the scene, motionless, yet his heart racing. Robert wore a crisp dress shirt, his hair neatly combed back, a luxury watch on his left wrist. But at that moment, none of that mattered. He had seen it all, from her hesitant first step inside to her humiliating ejection. He watched her shoulders shake as she leaned against the square's wall, taking a steadying breath to keep from breaking down. Robert knew that pain. He had seen it before. Worse, he had lived it. He remembered his mother, decades earlier, wearing that same expression, making that same plea for credit at the same bakery. Except back then, it was old Mr. George who threw out the no credit poor. He'd been just a boy in short pants, watching the most dignified woman he knew treated like trash. Robert closed his eyes. He felt no pity, only anger, but not at Emily, anger at the world that put her through that, anger at himself for never doing anything. Until now. He stood slowly. The square, the pigeons, the scent of bread. Everything seemed to conspire toward a reckoning with the past, but this time he would not be a mere observer. Robert remained seated, motionless, as the bakery scene unfolded before his eyes. The bench in the square where he sat became once again the stage for a cruel déjà vu. It wasn't the first time he'd seen a woman humiliated for asking for bread. But now, he was no longer that helpless boy. He was a man of means, and yet he felt fragile, stripped of everything. The smell of baked yeast still hung in the air, sweet and cruel. The same scent of a childhood Robert preferred to forget. His mind betrayed him. In the blink of an eye, he was 7 years old again. His mother, her apron stained, gripping his hand tight, entering the very same bakery. Her face weary, her eyes downcast. She had asked for just one loaf, only one. Old George had stared at her with contempt, as if she was something filthy. Credit. This isn't a charity, he'd said word for word. Robert remembered the sound of the door slamming, his mother's trembling hand, her stomach growling. Back then, Robert vowed he would become rich. Rich enough to never see his mother beg again. Rich enough to buy back her dignity and to protect it at all costs. And here he was, now, the man who had made it. Impeccably dressed, head of a respected company, featured in business magazines, a name people admired. But all that felt hollow, insignificant, as he watched Emily leave the bakery just as his mother had, striving for dignity, while the world crushed her inside. Robert rose slowly. The snap of his knee was the only sound that snapped him out of his memories. He didn't think. He didn't plan. He simply stepped into the bakery. Rogerio, the manager, was still behind the counter, talking loudly to a delivery man. Robert observed everything in silence for a moment. He recognized that young face, so similar to how he'd look running the register as a boy. Inherited arrogance, cultivated coldness. Robert didn't introduce himself. He just picked up a basket and began filling it. 4 French rolls, 2 still warm cheese buns, a bottle of fresh orange juice, 2 cartons of long-life milk, and a package of butter cookies. Rogerio watched him, puzzled. He tried to strike up a conversation. "Grabbing breakfast, Doc." Robert said nothing. He simply paid with large bills and walked out without glancing back. In the square, Emily sat in the shade of a tree, her daughters in her lap. She was telling them an improvised story to distract them from their empty stomachs. Laura seemed to understand more than she let on. Alice played with a plastic button, pretending it was food. Robert stopped a few steps away. Emily noticed him. Their eyes met. She stood up, instinctively pulling her girls closer. She was used to harsh stares and silent judgments, but this man's gaze was different. It held a storm. "Sorry to bother you," he said, his voice steady yet gentle. "I saw what happened, and I thought you might need this." He handed over the bag. Emily hesitated. Pride weighed heavy, but her daughter's hunger weighed more. The smell of bread escaped through the plastic. Alice looked up at her mother with wide eyes. Laura clutched her skirt. "It's just food," he added. "Nothing more." Emily took the bag slowly, as if accepting a lifeline rather than charity. She opened it. The bread was still warm. Little Alice let out a happy squeal. Laura smiled. Emily fought back her tears. "Thank you, sir." "Robert," he answered, Just Robert. She nodded. She didn't ask anything else. Neither did he. It wasn't time for questions. It was time to ease a suffering. Robert lingered for a moment. He watched the girls devour the bread as if it were a feast. He watched Emily tear the last cheese bun in half, giving it to her daughters instead of eating it herself. He saw in her the same silent strength of his own mother, the same weariness in her eyes, the same love that didn't shout but carried the world on its shoulders. In that moment, Robert realized he hadn't just witnessed humiliation. He had witnessed a promise being broken, the very promise he'd made as a child, to never let anyone endure what he'd endured. But now something would change, and he wasn't going to walk away without doing his part. The bag felt light in Robert's hands, but inside it lay something denser than bread and juice. A memory of an old promise, rediscovered on the streets of a forgotten neighborhood. He walked slowly, almost afraid of seeming intrusive. Emily was sitting on a makeshift concrete step by a peeling wall. The sun was already climbing high, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. Laura rested her head on her mother's shoulder, and Alice traced lines in the dirt with a stick. Emily was telling a hastily made-up funny story, mixing princesses and magic airplanes to distract the girls from their hunger. Each word came with effort, as if her own voice betrayed her. She did her best to appear strong, even though her stomach hurt and her heart felt heavy. Robert stopped a few paces away. He didn't want to startle her. He'd learned in life that when you truly give something, you do it with respect and silence. Emily caught sight of him out of the corner of her eye. She stiffened. She drew her daughters closer instinctively. "Sorry to bother you again," he said gently. "I just wanted to give you this." He held out the bag. She didn't answer right away. She looked at the package, then at him. He was well-dressed, clearly from another world, and Emily knew what it meant to depend on favors. Every gesture usually came with an unspoken price. "I'm not asking for charity, sir," she said firmly, though her voice trembled. Robert nodded. "I know. That's not what I'm offering." There was a brief, intense silence. Laura looked up curiously at the bag. The smell of warm, sweet bread wafted through the plastic. Alice inched closer, smiling in that way only a hungry, hopeful child can. Emily sighed. She gave in. She took the bag with both hands. She opened it slowly, as if she might still refuse. Inside were 4 golden rolls, 2 warm cheese buns, a bottle of fresh orange juice, milk, cookies. It was more than she'd expected, more than she'd dreamed of having that morning. Laura's eyes went wide, and she whispered, "Mom, there's juice!" Alice hopped up and pointed at the bread. Emily couldn't hold back a smile, even though her eyes were misty. She picked up a roll, tore it in half, and handed out the pieces like treasures. Robert stayed where he was, watching. He didn't step in. He said nothing more. He just stood there. The scene was simple. A mother, 2 daughters, and some bread. Yet it held more humanity than any boardroom he'd ever sat in, more truth than any contract he'd ever signed, more purpose than all his last month's profits combined. Emily wiped Laura's mouth with the hem of her blouse. Then she looked up at Robert. "Thank you, truly. I don't even know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," he replied. "I just wanted to make sure they didn't go hungry today." She nodded, moved but composed. There was dignity there, between fear and gratitude. There was strength. Robert felt a knot in his throat and looked away for a moment, gathering himself. "My name is Emily," she said, as if deciding to open a door. "These are my girls, Laura and Alice." Robert smiled. "They're beautiful. I'm Robert." Alice, her mouth full of bread, stretched out her little hand and offered him a piece. Robert knelt down and accepted it without hesitation. "Thanks, sweet girl," he said. "Best bread I've ever had." Emily laughed. A rare, quiet sound, as if her body had forgotten how to laugh. Laura looked at her mother and smiled, as if that brief moment were enough to color the whole day. The sun shone brighter now. The world went on outside, horns honking, footsteps, distant chatter. But on that concrete step, something untouchable was happening. A simple gesture, yes, but one charged with something far greater: empathy. Robert stood up slowly, brushing the crease out of his pant leg with a handkerchief. He took a step back. "I have to go now, but can I come by again sometime?" Emily hesitated for a second. Then she nodded. "You can." He smiled, turned, and walked down the street at a leisurely pace. As he went, he didn't think about unanswered emails, office reports, or meetings he might miss. He thought only of this: the face of a mother who, for a moment, had managed to smile. And the bread, blessed bread, as a silent symbol of something much bigger. He didn't know yet what he would do next, but he knew this meeting wouldn't be the last. Night had fallen heavily over the city, as if the sky wanted to hide the pain lingering in its alleys and corners. In the penthouse where he lived, Robert stared at the distant lights through the panoramic window. He had everything: space, comfort, state-of-the-art technology. But that night, none of it seemed to matter. None of his achievements could silence the noise in his mind. He tried to sleep. He tried to push the memory away. But as soon as he closed his eyes, the past hit him again. The dream began as always. He, a child, holding his mother's hand. She hurried along, her face set. She stopped in front of the bakery. He remembered her floral blouse, her hair tied with a red scarf. He remembered her ashamed look when the baker raised his voice and said, "We don't give away free bread here. Go bother child services." Her hand shook so violently he thought she'd let go. But she didn't. She pulled him out, head held high, stomach empty. Robert woke up sweating and gasping. It was as if that memory were etched into his skin. And now it was Emily's suffering. She was the continuation of that story, as if the universe had fashioned a mirror so he wouldn't forget. "You made a promise." Still in his pajamas, Robert got up, grabbed his laptop and typed in the bakery's name. The address was the same: registered owner. Padaria e Empreendimentos George Leda, the same family. The same surname, the same stage of pain. Robert snapped the laptop shut. It wasn't anger, it was resolve. He knew what he had to do. Meanwhile, in her wooden shack, Emily fought sleep too. Her daughters lay under a thin blanket, their faces serene thanks to the bread still warm in their bellies. Emily watched them tenderly, but inside she felt far away. The stranger's gesture, Robert's gesture, had been unexpected. Not for the food, but for the way he looked at her. As if he truly saw her, as if he recognized something in her, and that unsettled her. She sat on the edge of the mattress and pulled out an old notebook from a cardboard box, its cover wrapped in fabric. It was her measurements notebook. Inside were clients' notes, pattern sketches, designs for dresses she no longer had fabric to sew. She flipped through the pages slowly, as if touching something sacred. Before everything fell apart, Emily had been a sought-after seamstress. She worked from home, did alterations for a local shop, created custom garments. She didn't earn much, but she lived with dignity. Her husband, Adam, was a construction helper, hard-working, simple, a good father. Until one day, on his way home from work, he was run over by an out-of-control truck. The pain was sudden, but the descent was slow. The rent went unpaid. Clients disappeared. Her sewing machine broke. Food grew scarce. Friends drifted away. By the time Emily noticed, it was just her and her girls against the world. She closed the notebook, a book of memories, not of hope. But that night, for the first time in a long while, she felt something different. A spark. Robert hadn't made any promises, but his gesture ignited in Emily a glimmer that maybe Just maybe, there were still ways out. In the days that followed, Robert quietly began the process of acquiring the bakery. It wouldn't be easy. Family businesses rarely let go of their legacies easily, but he didn't just want the property. He wanted to transform it, to remove it from a history of humiliation and turn it into a symbol of justice. He used the name of one of his subsidiaries, nothing under his direct name. He didn't want exposure. He didn't seek applause. He wanted reparation. Meanwhile, he quietly had Emily's background checked, not out of mistrust, but out of genuine curiosity. He discovered she had been part of a solidarity economy project, had records of artisanal sewing, and before that, high marks in a free technical course. But nothing recent. Her trail went cold 3 years ago, exactly since her husband's death. Emily's pain now had a name and a date, and knowing that, Robert felt even more connected to her story. That same night, back at the square, he found the concrete step empty. But on the ground lay a small painted pebble, a roughly drawn yellow sun with a smiling face. He picked it up carefully, something only a child would leave, a gift for someone who left a mark. He smiled, moved. The pebble was now in his pocket, and with it came a final decision. He wouldn't just help. He would get involved, because Emily wasn't charity. She was lost dignity that deserved to be rebuilt. And Robert needed this gesture as much as she did. The sky was clear that morning, and the square, bathed in golden light, looked less harsh than usual. Robert arrived early, though in truth there was no appointed time, just a genuine wish to see her again. He carried 2 bags in his hands, one with fresh fruit and another with simple school supplies, colored pencils, notebooks, erasers. Nothing expensive, nothing extravagant, just practical, just humane. He sat on the bench, glanced around, and for a moment worried she might not come. Maybe she'd fled from something that seemed too good to be true, but she didn't. Emily appeared shortly after, holding her daughter's hands. Laura wore makeshift pigtails, and Alice held a little toy made from bottle caps. When she saw Robert, Laura let out a shy little smile, and Alice ran straight to him without hesitation. "You came back!" she shouted, as if greeting an old friend. Robert laughed, scooping her up in his arms for a moment, as if it were the most natural thing. Emily approached slowly, still wary but less tense. "I thought you wouldn't come back," she said. "Did I promise I would?" Robert replied. "No, but men who help once usually disappear afterward." Robert nodded. He knew that line came from experience, not bitterness. "I didn't come just to help. I wanted to talk, if that's okay." They sat on the bench. The girls went off to play in the tree's shade, sketching on the ground with the new pencils. Emily watched them with attentive eyes, but allowed herself to relax for a moment. "I've been thinking about you since that day," Robert began, "and I wanted to understand more about your story." Emily hesitated. She took a deep breath. "There's no glamour to it. I was a seamstress for years, started helping my mother, then got my own clients. I married Adam. He was a construction helper. We didn't have luxury, but we had peace. Until..." Her voice cracked. A truck hit him at a sight, and that was it. Everything fell apart. My machine broke, rent went unpaid, we went hungry. The rest, you saw. Robert fell silent for a few seconds. He didn't want to interrupt or fill the quiet with pity. "What if you could sew again?" he asked directly. She turned her face, surprised. "How do you mean?" "I have a friend who runs a social garment workshop. It's a program that helps women re-enter the workforce. Not charity, real work. They need experienced seamstresses. I can set up an interview if you'd like." Emily eyed him skeptically. She'd heard similar pitches before, and reality always came with hidden strings. But something in his tone was different. No urgency, no pressure, just a straightforward offer. "And what do you get out of this?" Robert smiled, unoffended. peace, and maybe a bit of redemption. She frowned. Redemption? Let's just say you made me think of someone very important, and I missed my chance to help her when it mattered. With you, maybe I can make it right. Emily looked down. His words hit her hard. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen, not as a problem to solve, but as a person to respect. I can try, she said softly, but I don't want to promise anything to the girls yet. They've had enough disappointments. Understandable, and there's one more thing. Robert pulled a simple flyer from the bag. It was for a community school supported by a social institute linked to his company. The school offered free spots, meals, and extracurricular activities. A safe place, a place of dignity. There are 2 openings, he said. If you'd like to visit, I can arrange it. The girls could study there. Eat, play, learn. Emily held the flyer as if it were made of glass. Her eyes welled, but she didn't cry. She glanced at her daughters, now drawing flowers on the sidewalk. Hope returned in small but real doses. "Why are you doing this?" she asked at last. Robert didn't answer right away. He looked at Alice, who lifted her crayon-drawn flower in the air, proud, then at Laura, clapping for her sister. "Because no one should go hungry. Not today, not ever." Emily said nothing more. She simply reached out her hand. Robert took it, firmly, humanely, sealing more than an offer of help, sealing the start of a new chapter, for both of them. In that moment, among colored pencils and shared bread, a silent alliance was born, built not on empty promises but on real possibilities. And life, long in ruins, began to rebuild itself, one step at a time. Her first day at the workshop arrived sooner than Emily expected. She woke up before her alarm, her heart racing and her stomach twisting, not from hunger but from nerves. She watched her girls still sleeping and felt a quiet pride as she laid out the simple clothes she'd gotten from a charity bazaar, carefully washed and hastily ironed. She put on the nicest blouse she owned, pinned her hair back with a crooked barrette, and took a deep breath in front of the cracked mirror. There she was, the same woman who days before had begged for bread. Now she was about to sit at a sewing machine again. The workshop was larger than she'd imagined. The walls were painted in bright colors. There was good ventilation, natural light, and soft music playing in the background. The coordinator, a woman with a steady voice named Marta, greeted her with a genuine smile, one that didn't seem forced. "Go easy today, okay? No pressure. This is just so you can get comfortable." Emily nodded. Her hands trembled when she touched the first piece of fabric. It was a lightweight, delicate cotton. She remembered the party skirts she used to make, the custom-fitted dresses she designed with passion. She closed her eyes for a second, inhaled, and then stitched her first seam. It was firm. It was perfect. Across town, Laura and Alice were exploring their new school. The playground had trees, a swing set, even a real slide. The girls received uniforms and lunchboxes filled with juice and whole wheat bread. For the first time, Emily saw her daughters walk into a classroom smiling, not out of fear, but with joy. That same day, Robert sat in his office and received some news. A local journalist who knew about the workshop project had been moved by Emily's story. Marta, the coordinator, had shared just the essentials. No exaggeration, no drama, just the truth. The article ran under the headline, "She didn't beg for charity, she asked for hope." It was a simple, straightforward piece, but powerful. It spoke of a woman's dignity who refused to give up, the strength that lives in a mother's silence. It recounted the bakery scene, without names, and praised the anonymous man who offered more than food. He offered respect. Robert read every line with a lump in his throat. He wasn't looking for recognition, but seeing Emily recognized for her strength, that touched him deeply. The story went viral. Social media shares, influencer comments, mothers identifying with her. Emily's name began to circulate, not as a victim, but as a symbol. In the bakery, Rogerio read the newspaper, his coffee mug shaking in his hand. The scene described was unmistakable. He knew it was about him. He knew the woman he'd cruelly thrown out was now a headline. But not as a beggar, as an example of resilience. He felt exposed, even though no names were mentioned. It stung his pride. The pride of someone who never imagined his arrogance would be exposed by acts beyond his narrow view of the world. Back at the workshop, Emily was finishing her first week. Marta watched her closely. She was dedicated, meticulous. She had talent to spare, but what impressed Marta most was her demeanor, humble but firm, grateful but not submissive, a woman who knew the value of every penny and every stitch. "You sew as if you're speaking," Marta said one afternoon. "Each stitch seems to say something." Emily smiled, surprised. "I sew like I breathe. Without this, I fall apart." True to his word, Robert followed her progress from afar. He didn't want to intrude or seem like a savior. He'd occasionally send a discreet message through Marta, a compliment, a word of encouragement, a "she's doing great" update. At night, he saved screenshots of the article, photos of the workshop, the girls' drawings now pinned to the school's bulletin boards. He collected everything like evidence that small acts still mattered. And Emily began to smile again. Not a full smile. The grief for her husband still hurt, the fear still lingered. But there was light. There was bread, school, needle, and thread. Above all, there was dignity. The morning started out like any other in Robert's office. A strong coffee on the desk, meetings on the calendar, calls to take. But among the papers lay an envelope splattered with colorful ink. No sender, no address. Curious, he opened it carefully. Inside was a child's drawing, 3 figures holding hands, a woman in a floral dress, 2 smiling little girls, and in the center between them a big loaf of bread with eyes and a grin. Above them shone a massive sun. Below, in crooked blue crayon letters, a single line: "Now Mommy smiles." Robert held the paper for a few moments, unable to blink. Every innocent stroke pulled him back to that park bench, to the moment he first saw Emily. He remembered the shared bread, Laura's startled look, Alice's timid hope. On the back of the drawing was a signature: Alice, age 4. Robert closed his eyes. He didn't cry, but silent tears welled up. This wasn't just a child's drawing, it was a declaration, a milestone, a thank you that no corporation, diploma, or check could ever buy. That afternoon, he cleared his schedule and called Marta, the workshop coordinator. "I'd like to meet with you and Emily. I have a proposal." 2 days later, Emily arrived at the workshop expecting just another shift. Her hair was pinned back with the colorful clips Laura had made at school. She greeted her co-workers with a smile, stopping only when she saw Marta standing in the doorway of the small auditorium beside Robert. "Is something happening?" she asked, tense. "Yes," Marta said, beaming. "Something very good." Emily stepped inside. In the center of the room, on a table draped with a white cloth, stood a brand-new sewing machine, modern, whisper-quiet, complete with every accessory. Beside it lay an envelope addressed to her, and a contract. "Robert wanted to give this to you in person," Marta explained. Emily looked at him, bewildered. "Why?" Robert unfolded Alice's drawing with care. "Because you don't just sew clothes, you sew stories. And now, we want you to lead a new line of children's apparel. Simple designs, comfortable, colorful, drawn from your story and your daughters." Emily took a step back, her heart racing. "Me, lead. You have the talent, the vision, the sensitivity, and no one understands what a child needs better than a mother like you. It's an experimental line. If it succeeds, it could grow. We want you to start it." Emily clutched the envelope, trembling. She opened it. It was real. A fair salary, logistical support, creative autonomy, a genuine opportunity. She covered her face with her hands, and this time the tears came freely. I thought I'd never again. Now you can do anything, Robert said, because you're the seamstress of the impossible. Meanwhile, at the old corner bakery, Rogerio was packing up the last of his things. A new manager would take over the next day. Weeks earlier, Robert had purchased the shop through a shell company and quietly renovated everything. New furnishings, new staff, new values. On the wall hung a fresh poster. Here, bread feeds more than the body, it feeds dignity. That night, Emily set up the sewing machine at home. It was the first new thing to enter her shack in years. Alice was fascinated by the knobs. Laura ran her fingers over the motor and said, "Now we'll hear the sound of Mommy being happy." And it was true. The seamstress who days earlier had begged for 2 loaves on credit was now in charge of a brand new collection. She was heard, she was respected. She was once again the architect of her own destiny, and on the school's bulletin board, Alice's drawing now had a frame and a plaque beneath it. Now Mommy smiles. Time had passed. The leaves in the square were now drier, the winds gentler. But the simple green-painted wooden bench remained the same, the very bench where Robert had silently witnessed a woman's humiliation, a woman who would change his life, and unbeknownst to her, heal a part of his soul. It was Saturday, late afternoon. The sun bathed everything in a nostalgic golden glow. Robert arrived first. He wasn't wearing a suit, just a simple shirt with rolled-up sleeves, like someone who no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. Emily appeared shortly after, smiling. She wore a skirt she'd sewn herself and a light floral blouse, her hair loose. Laura and Alice were at school for a children's event. Emily came alone, but she didn't come empty-handed. "I thought you wouldn't come," Robert said, making room on the bench. "I almost didn't," she replied, sitting down, "but I didn't want to leave this circle open." Robert smiled. They looked together at the gazebo in the center of the square, at children running, couples strolling, and the lady selling sweets from her basket. Life went on, and now it went on more lightly. "You know," Emily said, "I thought a lot about what I'd say when I saw you again. I wanted to thank you in every possible way." Robert shook his head. "There's nothing to thank me for. I just did what my mother would have wanted someone to do for her. But everything that came after, you built." Emily looked at him kindly and said, "Sometimes all we need is a chance, a door, a look without judgment." Robert sighed. She was right, and he knew it. His gesture had only been the beginning, the strength, the path, the choice. It had all been hers. "How are things at the workshop?" he asked. "Growing. We already have a new line coming out," she said proudly, "and new women are joining. Women like me with different stories but the same thirst for a fresh start." Robert smiled, feeling his heart warm. "And the girls?" "Laura wants to be a teacher. Alice says she'll be a famous baker," she laughed. "Go figure." Just then, they both noticed something across the street. An elderly woman with grey hair was entering the bakery, her steps slow. She wore worn sandals and carried a cloth bag. She approached the counter cautiously. "Sir, could you put 2 rolls on my tab? I'll come back tomorrow, I swear to God." The new manager, a young man, looked at her and smiled without hesitation. "Of course, ma'am. Trust is built with dignity. Take the bread. Come back when you can." Emily watched in silence. Robert did too. "Looks like things really do change, huh?" she whispered. "Yes, sometimes slowly, sometimes with a loaf of bread." They exchanged a glance. No more words were needed. They knew that, on that bench, they were no longer who they had been. They'd crossed wounds, fallen, risen, and above all learned that the greatest gestures need not be grand. They only need to be true. An imaginary camera pulls back. The bench remains, a silent witness to transformation. The square stays alive. The bakery is now a place where bread no longer carries shame, but hope. And at the heart of it all, the simplest gesture, a warm loaf, an empathetic gaze, proves once and for all that what truly feeds the soul is humanity. I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you did, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought about the story. See you in the next video.